I also made the case for owning Bitcoin, the quintessence of scarcity premium. It's literally the only large tradable asset in the world that has a known fixed maximum supply. By its design, the total quantity of Bitcoins cannot exceed 21 million.
Bitcoin is the hardest money that has ever been invented.
If you don't have my private key, you cannot spend my Bitcoin, period. And this is the power of Bitcoin.
It's the first time we figured out how to create true property that you can take possession of with full custodial rights.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking in Bits, where we walk you through Bitcoin bit by bit so we can provide you with the information you need to succeed and persist. Back with episode 64, and I got my really good friend Keyan here in the house. How's it going, good sir?
I'm good, Jose. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I was just saying off the mic how this is a long overdue episode, and I don't know why I waited so long. Maybe I was shy.
Oh, that's you shouldn't have been shy. This will be a lot of fun, I'm sure.
It will be. No, I just wanted the perfect timing. I know that Stacker News is starting to roll up, and well, it's been doing its thing, but I think now it's starting to get more of a lot of users behind it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But Keyan, before we go deeper into the conversation, I always like to let my guests share their Bitcoin story. I always think it's not only fascinating to hear the different arenas that people come into Bitcoin from, but the longer they're in Bitcoin, the more fascinating the story. So would you mind just please sharing with our guests your Bitcoin story?
Yeah. I don't know if if it gets more fascinating as time goes on. I mean, you end up telling it so many times that maybe the story gets more colorful as time goes on. But my Bitcoin story is I first encountered Bitcoin as a thing probably in 2012. I was just graduated from college and saw it on Hacker News or something, and so I became peripherally aware of it. But I didn't really connect the technology to the philosophy so much. I didn't really get that it was this kind of freedom from the traditional financial system until much later. Then I first probably used Bitcoin in 2014. Told the story on another podcast, but it was to buy LSD on the dark net. So, so a lot of people's early interaction with Bitcoin was to use it for illicit purposes, and that was mine. I still had not yet connected the philosophy with the utility. That didn't really happen until about 2016, mid 2016, and then I didn't really get very deep into it until around 2017, and that's when I really began to understand. Oh wow, it has all it subscribes to this philosophy that I've been a fan of since my early 20s, which is this Austrian economics, anarchism, Rothbard Mises, this whole kind of thing like that. I finally understood that Bitcoin tied into that, and then I got a little more interested in 2017 and kind of following Pierre Rochard and Michael Goldstein, I believe it is, and Jimmy Song, Saif Dean, all these people on Twitter. I got really kind of deep into it that way, and then the closing chapter to that is I moved to Austin last year, and I've decided to work full time in Bitcoin from now on, and that's kind of the whole journey, though.
Yeah. Now, was there a certain event? I know you said there a few times that you couldn't really piece the philosophy or you didn't get it. Was there a certain event that happened, or was it just more the education kept coming in and make it more sense?
Yeah, it wasn't a particular. I don't think it was a particular event. I think I was on Twitter, and I was kind of looking for the next thing to do at the same time I was on Twitter, but I was kind of a part of this low carb community on Twitter. And then there was a lot of crossover. I was noticing a lot of crossover with Bitcoiners, and there was a lot of carnivores also crossing over into that low carb community. And then I started following some of those Bitcoin carnivores, and then I was like, oh wow, they also kind of agree with me on all these economic things. And then I was trying to figure out what to do after after I would leave my next job. And yeah, so it kind of was a nice moment, but that was probably the precipitating like event was meeting Bitcoin Twitter accidentally.
Now that stuff is still the same today, and what I mean by that stuff is like, you know, the carnivores and the people that seem to just reject the normal, you know, what you would call the normie way of living. What do you think? Why do you think that is? Since, you know, you encountered Bitcoin outside of Bitcoin technically, right? From the carnivores moving around, is it just a urge to just reject the normal stuff, or is it something bigger than that, in your opinion?
I mean, I don't think it's that knee jerk. I mean, I think there is like a bit of a questioning of everything.
Yeah.
But the carnivores aren't also like flat earthers necessarily. So I'm sure I'm sure there is a flat earth carnivore Bitcoiner out there. But like,
oh, yeah.
it's not like the Bitcoin carnivores are rejecting everything. It's just I think it's rather than rejecting everything, it might be like a sensitivity to something that's broken, and like detecting that there's something perhaps broken with the way we kind of view food, and being willing to go back and try something that's like relatively drastic, but potentially like transformational.
Yeah, and it's some sovereignty in a sense. I think a lot of people have spotted what's wrong. I wouldn't say with the world, but just in their life, and then have tried to reverse engineer what that problem is, and just kind of discover these type of simple ways of living, but also being sovereign away from, you know, what we know as, you know, government way of means, or the common education of things, which I always think is fascinating. And then this is what I mean. The story is always fascinating. Like, I came into Bitcoin really headstrong in the middle of 2020. So to me, it's like, what I think is what I'm seeing today is new, but obviously these carnivores and these, you know, and these sovereign, you know, seeking individuals have always been around. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I was part of like anarchist communities on the internet back in like 2000, probably like 2005, as early as 2005. I was kind of in those communities, and a lot of those people were talking about a lot of these things. I became somewhat disillusioned because we had no solutions to them other than to complain about them. And that's, you know, and that's where Bitcoin is really cool, because it's finally something that makes some of these values possible in the world, and it's neat.
Yeah, it's the weapon that's been needed for, I guess, as long as people have been thinking about these things. Now, the word anarchist and the term anarchist, that usually has a bad rap that goes behind it. Why do you think that is? Is it just movies? Is it just bad education? What do you think?
I think it is probably the like stereotypes are like misinformed, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the anarchists I've met are like people who are very well read on like political philosophy, and find the idea of like voluntary interactions with other people very compelling. There perhaps is a subset of anarchists, but I would say there that are a subset of anarchists that are more like the stereotype. But I would say they're a lot like people who are perhaps Satan worshiping, like where it's more so they're doing it more so for the identity and the imagery of it. Like they want to be part of something counterculture, and so they slap the anarchist symbol on everything. They do the like pentagram or whatever on everything, and they are like pro disorder, and just like upsetting people. But I think that is just a stereotype and not really representative at all of most anarchists.
Yeah, would freedom fighters be a good term to attach?
Freedom fighters are pretty is maybe pretty good. I don't know if anarchists really want to fight, or okay. If they even care too much about. I mean, they definitely care about their own freedom, but it's more like it just seems rational that to most of us that I think would at some point subscribe to anarchism or are currently anarchists. it just feels rational to be able to choose what you do in your life and not have someone be able to tell you what you can and can't do, assuming you don't infringe on someone else's right to do the same.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Yeah. I'm going to shift it back just a little bit into a little bit of your background here, Keyan. Development. So that's something you always knew you wanted to do. Did you major in it? Did you just stumble across it? How did you get into development?
Yeah. So that's cool. I actually didn't know I wanted to be a programmer. Like in high school, I didn't do really, really well in high school. I actually didn't graduate from high school. I didn't know I wanted to be a programmer. I played a lot of sports when I was younger, and I was kind of focused on that for a long time. And then once I started getting injured and kind of aging out of my athletic peak, I didn't really have much of an identity in terms of like what I wanted to do. And I was so focused on that. I didn't realize I had any intellectual capacity or appetite at all. And then it wasn't until later I decided to go back to school. I was going to do pre-med. This was like in my early 20s. And I was forced to take a computer science prereq for pre-med. And I encountered a passage in one of the books that we were supposed to be reading for this class about artificial intelligence. And it just like really blew my mind. And just to like think about the possibility of potentially creating something that is perhaps equivalent to or exceeding human intelligence, from without involving biology, really, with just like a computer process. Something about that was really cool, and it latched on. And then around the same time too, the iPhone had just come out, and I was seeing a lot of people, people I would probably consider more artists or creators releasing apps and deriving income from it, like deriving enough income where they could be an artist releasing apps. A lot of them were games, but they were releasing apps on the App Store and independently, free of anyone else, with very little capital to start, were able to live their life. And I found that really compelling too. And so I was like, maybe I should take more computer science classes. And then I took more computer science classes, and I was pretty much hooked. I had no idea it'd even be lucrative. Like I thought I'd be making a teacher salary. I didn't realize the market really valued programmers that much. I remember the first time I realized the market valued programmers. One of my friends went off to do a internship at Google one summer during college. And I was like, how much are they paying you? And he's like, oh, for the summer, they're paying me, I think it was like $45,000 for the summer. And I'm like, what are you even doing? And he's like, I'm not really doing much of anything. Bear in mind, this is like 2010. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. He was making almost what I thought I'd be making in a year-long salary, but he's like, that $45,000 is just to prepare you for what to expect you eventually get paid. So I was like, wow, this thing that I had fallen in love with, that I found that I don't really want to do anything else but do this thing. It happens to also be valuable to the market, and I was pleasantly surprised. But yeah, I was kind of late to programming.
Yeah, that was the around the time where you can sell a fart making app for $1 and get paid.
yeah. Around 2008, yeah, you could get rich on a fart making app. It's like an NFT minting launch thing now.
And that wasn't even too long ago. Is the I think the part that people forget. I mean, that was just a blink of an eye if you think about it.
Oh, it's super. I mean, to us old people, it's like it feels like a blink of an eye. But to like, if you talk to a 15-year-old, they're like, "Oh, that was so long ago." So I think it was a really long time ago. We're just old.
That's a good point. Valid point. Now, before we get into a stack of news, I think I just want to clean off the table on any. Did you contribute or did you create any products before you started working on Stack of News that you want to bring up here? Or
a lot. I mean, I created a lot of them. I think I tried to count how many like startups I quote unquote failed or didn't really take off in a huge way. I think it was something like 7 projects. So in college, I created a location-based wiki. It was an iOS app. It was you can kind of think of it like Wikipedia, but it was a map, and you could interact. Like other people could put location-based content in there, and it was just for the college town I lived in. I did that. I did another startup where you review things with friends on it. It was kind of like Yelp, but you could review anything on it, and it would only give you reviews based on who you were connected to, friendship-wise. That failed spectacularly. It failed worse than the college project I did. Somewhere in there too, before I did the review app, I did another app that allowed you to, it basically turned a Facebook page into like an anonymous confessions thing where you could anonymously post things to the Facebook page. And it was very like trendy at that time to have. There was like Yik Yak, and I think Secret was another one, where these apps where people would go on and confess their whatever they wanted to confess anonymously. And so I made something like that. There are so many others. Those are like the early memorable ones. More recently, before Stacker News, I created like a Pinterest for doctors that's still going. We don't really work on it very actively, but it's still going and generates ad revenue and has like, I think it's something like 300,000 people on it a month.
Oh,
so
wow. What's it called?
GretMed.
GretMed. And when you mean Pinterest for doctors, it just means that doctors can exclusively post topics that people can scroll through? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's like Pinterest in that you like upload images and videos, and it's only images and videos. That's like the only content on there. It doesn't. There's no real way to like determine whether someone's a doctor or not. So it's mostly, but the content is all focused towards doctors. It's like all the medical guidelines. My co-founder, who is an internist, is very into like evidence-based medicine. So it's all of like the highest yield evidence-based medicine graphics on there, and we fell into like an SEO niche, and it did kind of well.
Nice. Now, so is the idea? It sounds like for you has always been create an app that you can build a business around. Have you ever just built anything that was just for fun, or is it always just let's try to get this thing off the ground and build a business around it?
Yeah. So the business thing is probably like the last thing I thought about. The project I mentioned during college, the location-based wiki, I never intended to build a business. I probably could have built a business around it because it did really well. I just didn't realize that having 5,000 users like meant something. I thought it was like a blip. I thought it was like, oh, it doesn't have, like, it's not taking off. It's not getting shared everywhere. It only has 5,000 downloads. No, and it's probably not a big deal. I had other people reaching out to me about it, but for some reason I thought it wasn't a business. And so I just I assumed it was a failure. That some of that confessions page I mentioned, that had about 2,000 users. I probably could have turned that into a business too. But I didn't. Similarly, I didn't realize that level of traction was something you could turn into a business. I thought something had to blow up to 1 million people very fast for it to mean something. I didn't, it didn't occur to me until several failures later that there were early indications of something that could succeed and turn it into a business. But those are things that I've made for that. I mean, there are other projects that I do for learning. Like when I was initially getting into Bitcoin, I made a little a Merkle tree library and understood how Merkle trees work. Little programming projects. But right now I really enjoy the idea of someone using what I make.
Yeah. And
so it lends itself really well to starting a business around. If you have that inclination to want to provide value to other people, you might be able to enter into a relationship with someone where you're continually providing them value and they give you some value back. But, and that's a business.
Yeah. Well, this is actually a good segue to start getting into Stacker News. I didn't want to start here, but it's just something that popped into my head. So you have a history of making applications. I had a little bit of run in 2018 where I was doing Android apps, so I have a little bit of experience of trying to publish into the Play Store. Now I've noticed that as of yet, I'm sure it may be coming, Stacker News is not a typical app on a phone, but you have an experience with doing apps for phones. Is it the difficulty of dealing with the Google and the Apples of the world? Was it a more strategic decision to not make a Stacker News app? What was the logic behind that?
Yeah.
That's a big question there.
no, it's not. It's not that. So a lot of users request a mobile app.
Yeah.
The main reason why I haven't done it is because it'll slow me down a lot.
Okay.
Right now, if you wanted something to change on Stacker News right now, and it was relatively small, I could, while we're talking right now, I could go in and change the code, and within a minute or two, it would be changed on the website. And that's just one example. But like in the App Store, if I create an app, I now have to go through a submission process to get it approved. So there's like a huge lag between me submitting something. The other thing is, a lot of Bitcoin apps get rejected from the App Store. So even if I created a Stacker News iOS and Android app, there's no at Google or Apple's will. It might have been a wasted effort, and it can't get updated. I know Sphinx Chat has this issue on iOS. I'm sure there are many other Bitcoin apps that have the same problem. The other thing is like complexity of code management. So right now I have one code base, and a person with an Android phone, an iOS phone, a laptop computer, a desktop computer, a tablet, all of those people can run Stacker News and use Stacker News today. But if I do an iOS or an Android, if I do an iOS app, then I need an iOS code base. If I do an Android app, I need an Android code base. I could maybe use something like React Native that deploys on both, but it's at least one other code base that I have to maintain other than the website. And I can't take down the website because the users still expect that to exist. So I'd be more or less doubling my work at least by adding a mobile app. So I intend to do it eventually. It's just I'm not sure it's worth doing just yet.
Yeah. Just off the what you were saying there, the rejection or the possible rejection of an Apple or of a Google to have that authority. I agree with you. I think that would just be backwards, if that makes sense. And because you're opening up your time to be able to get updates out on the fly, you can actually focus on the user as opposed to a revenue or any other type of thing to deal with. All right, Let's talk Stacker News.
Okay.
All right, I've been using it. I think I remember the very first time I was out there in Austin, and you literally onboarded me right there with a Lightning wallet immediately. That was one of the moments where I was like, oh shit. Now I'm still figuring out how I can best use Stacker News, but for the listeners that don't know Stacker News, please explain it to them in a TLDR. And if you can explain to me, what was it that you were trying to solve by creating Stacker News?
So the TLDR is, it's like Reddit, but your karma is Bitcoin. So that's kind of TLDR. Like if you want to extend that out a couple of more sentences, it costs a sat to post or comment. And upvote, but all the upvotes you receive, in addition to tips or anything else, that's all Bitcoin that you can withdraw at the site at any time. So it's kind of like if Reddit's karma system were built on a decentralized ledger that the rest of the world accepted as money. That's basically what Stacker News is. It uses Bitcoin as a karma system.
And that have you seen or have you found over time that kind of flushes out a lot of the nonsense because those nonsense or clout chasers are not willing to pay the set?
I actually don't think that has come to bear yet. Like there are people who will post nonsense on Stacker News, but I think most Bitcoiners are more conscientious than I would say the average person. And I think they So the Stacker News filters out people who aren't Bitcoiners pretty much, because you kind of have to use Lightning to be able to interact with it. And so it makes sure that the worst user is at least a Bitcoiner, and most Bitcoiners are above average people. So that like helps. And then right now it is just one sat to post or comment, but there's still there. We have additional mechanisms we have like a trust algorithm. Like we determine whether a user is trustworthy based on a few things that affect whether other users end up seeing your content. So it's kind of like Reddit in that way, where not all upvotes are the same. Upvotes from certain users count for more than upvotes from other users. And there's possibility to increase the cost to post or comment to the point where it is actually would actually discourage someone from really abusing it if they had that intent. But so far we're so small, no one's really had too much of a malicious intent to that we've seen.
So was the problem you were trying to solve, if any, just to make a better Reddit? Is that safe to say, or is it deeper than that?
I don't know. It's so weird because from the outside, when we all look at products from the outside, it always think the person had the whole vision flushed out from the beginning and they're making it a reality. For me, it wasn't making a better Reddit. It was like, I wanted more Bitcoin news. So I want to find Bitcoin news more easily. So why don't I create a place where people can post Bitcoin news? And shouldn't it use Bitcoin? And Sphinx Chat just came out and they're using Bitcoin for spam prevention. The Lightning Network is really cool. Why don't I do more things with the Lightning Network? And then it's almost like you get the door to the vision is cracked at the very beginning. And it's just recognizing that light flowing out of the edge of the door. And as you're building the thing, you're kind of wedging the door further and further open. So I still don't know what the Stacker News looks like, 5 years from now, assuming we still exist. I'm hoping we still exist, and I'll probably be I'm be working very hard to make sure we do. But so many things could change. I had no idea I'd be doing this thing where I was making $1,000 a month on job posts, but then giving it all back to my users. I had no idea I'd be doing that. And that's just what eventually ended up happening. I had no idea that, some users would have AMAs that would net them, 150,000 sats. These things just didn't occur to me at the beginning. And I'm sure I'm going to be surprised by so many more things that happen eventually.
Yeah, it's like an onion that keeps on peeling itself, pretty much.
Yeah.
You get to the center at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so one of the things, because we know, as Bitcoiners, we know that this is not possible on-chain just because of, the simplicity of one sat being sent out, or the complexity, depending on how you look at it. So I've been very fascinated lately with not only Lightning and how difficult it is to work with, from what I hear, but the many different implementations of Lightning. Can you chime in on that from your experience? Is it really difficult to work on Lightning? Is that just more of a misnomer? What are your thoughts on working with Lightning?
I mean, it depends on which facet of working with Lightning you mean. As far as development, I would say it's not super hard. You have to get a node up, and you have to put some Bitcoin on it and open channels and maintain decent balance among your channels. So there's that part that's kind of perhaps unique to Bitcoin and Lightning. So you need to run a node and do some of this channel management stuff. But the other aspect of developing an app on Lightning, at least in a context where you have a custodial wallet, the only other thing you really have to do is interact with the APIs that the implementations provide. And that's if you wanted to integrate any kind of payment, you would have to interact with an API. Someone that wraps a bank like Stripe or someone, a PayPal before Stripe existed, you would have to interact with an API. So that's not much different. So I think there's a lot of difficulties in terms of like creating a non-custodial web wallet. I think there's a lot that can be done there. There's also a bunch of issues with like users trying to send funds to your node. Perhaps they don't have the right liquidity in between them and your node. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think of it as terribly hard. I mean, everything can get easier, I didn't have to hit a button to start this call with you like that. Maybe in the future we'll have some kind of brain machine interface that makes it so I don't have to hit the button. But at some point it's pretty easy. I guess running a node and everything is kind of hard, but then you have Voltage who kind of will do a lot of that hard work for you. Yeah. So there's a variety of ways to make your life easier. As far as like the implementations, I use LND. It was the reason why I chose it was it seemed like the community there was more active, really. And then I extrapolated a number of things from it. I hadn't actually used Core Lightning. Back then it was called C Lightning. But I hear great things about it. And I think it's looking more and more interesting as time goes on to a lot of developers because of the rich plugin system, because they're a little more focused on specs and upgrades to the protocol than some of the other implementations. But I can't really speak to like the differences because I haven't really used Core Lightning much. I haven't used Eclair at all. I hear great things about LDK. I talk to a lot of people who are building things on LDK, and they seem to really enjoy how modular it is. But I don't really have much of a developed opinion on them. I use LND and it works pretty fine for now. So
yeah. Now, in your opinion, do you think eventually, we have to get to one protocol here? Because I think a lot of the misconception with the average user is that there is only one Lightning network, right? They don't understand the different implementations and the different protocols like you just stated. Now, do you think it's bad for everybody to keep working on their specific one? Or at some point, do we have to make up our mind and say, this is it? This is the Lightning network?
Well, so each implementation isn't its own, doesn't have its own protocol, but each of them is now, they're somewhat divergent in the features they're adding to the protocol. So there isn't really required consensus among all of them, like in Bitcoin, where we need every node to have all of the same protocol features. It's like there is no like global consensus that has to be reached. Okay. But you might not be able to communicate with other nodes if your node doesn't support protocol features that node requires.
I see.
I don't know. It's a decent. There's a lot of conversation to be had around like whether multiple implementations is good or not. I know with Bitcoin Core or the Bitcoin protocol itself, it seems most people have arrived at the conclusion that we should just really have one Bitcoin implementation, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs because the implementation becomes what defines the protocol, and the implementation will have bugs that then become almost like protocol features, or like if you want to create an alternative implementation, you have to implement the bugs that are in Bitcoin Core, and yeah, I think it's less. It's certainly less of a concern around the difficulties of multiple implementations in the Lightning Network because it doesn't need to reach global consensus. And if I create my own Lightning Network node implementation and it sucks, and it's only really me who's using it. It doesn't really matter. It also doesn't matter in Bitcoin Core, in Bitcoin protocol. It doesn't matter either. But it doesn't really break the network in a serious way. It just kind of prevents the users who have the different version from being able to interact with people people with other implementations. Yeah, in short, I really don't know. I don't think we'll need one implementation of Lightning. I think we might converge on one. I mean, I think for Lightning implementations, it's going to end up a lot more like browsers. That seems to be like the closest like thing or analogy that I can come up with, where they're all kind of independently developed and they can all kind of have their own different feature sets. And but the market tends to pick a winner, and like most people end up using that browser. And but we have a bunch of other types of browsers that exist, and I think that's fine. And I think it's roughly what we see in the Lightning implementation space now. Is you have the dominant Lightning implementation LND, and then you have which is maybe to some people's dissatisfaction is not perhaps part of the spec process or engaging in the spec process very much, because they don't have to. They don't need a spec because they control most of the nodes on the network, more or less. They control the code that they're running, so they don't have to really try to get the other implementations to agree to implement something. And that's kind of what you saw with IE, where it deviated pretty heavily from web standards. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it'll stay that way forever. IE eventually fell out of grace, and we might see that happen with Lightning implementations.
Internet Explorer, when you say IE?
Yeah. Okay, Internet
Gotcha.
Explorer. Yeah.
Now the browser analogy I really actually like. Would different type of currency analogies work here too? Meaning that like right now, if I wanted to use the euro, I would have to convert that dollar into the euro to then trade with people that are accepting the euro. So if I wanted to use, let's just say, LND, then I needed to trade some Bitcoin onto that protocol, to that network, that implementation, and then trade with those users. Or is that just a bad analogy in itself?
I think it's a bad analogy, because it's more like, how is this better? Because there's no conversion between Lightning implementations that needs to take place. They're all talking in the currency metaphor. They're all talking USD, but I mean they're all talking the protocol of Lightning. They all implement the similar protocol, implement the same bolts. I mean, some of them have additional features, additional bolts. These improvement proposals for Lightning, but yeah, there's no conversion. So if you have a C Lightning node and I have an LND node, we can open a channel together, and we can, and that works perfectly fine. There isn't any disagreement on like the core protocol features. It's just kind of where like new protocol features, that's where we're beginning to get some disagreement. And so you potentially have a situation where you have a lot of core Lightning nodes that implement Bolt 12. But if you're not running a core Lightning node, you can't interact with Bolt 12. You'd have to change to use a core Lightning node. So that's why I think browsers are perhaps a better analogy, because they're kind of these independent things. They all read a web page, and all Lightning implementations, they all speak the core Lightning protocol. It's just, some browsers might allow an animated GIF and other ones don't. And,
Great example there. Yeah. Well, we'll go with the browser one then. We'll try. So this is something that I've bumped into lately, and I'm sure you could appreciate this as a programmer, but I want to know where your place lies, or where you stand in simplicity versus, I guess, sovereignty. I don't know what the word I'm using here, but I'll give you the example. So I run my own node. You were stating a little bit earlier about the complexities of maybe opening channels and having the right liquidity in and the right liquidity out. And then on the other hand, we could use custodial Lightning implementations like Cash App and instantly get that satisfaction of seeing it go through, as opposed to 75% of my transactions through my node are bottlenecked or I'm getting errors. Now I know things will get easier over time, but and this is a conversation that was happening on Twitter. At what point does Lightning start trending towards like a PayPal 2.0 instead of, like a sovereign privacy tool, which is what us Bitcoiners want our currency to be?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure at what point it should be of concern to all of us that who want the kind of sovereign world, and it seems to be just a whole lot easier to defer things to a custodian. There are like some nice hybrid models. You have this kind of like hosted channel model where you only have one channel open to what it's called an LSP, and you're still maintaining the keys. You still have to kind of like sign transactions. There's Greenlight has an interesting approach to this where you hold on to your keys, but they run the node, manage the liquidity. I believe they manage the liquidity and stuff for you. So I think there's enough awareness in the space that we might become I think we're getting kind of defensive against the potential future of, custodians winning. But I suspect the future is more of like a variety of approaches. I think so long as we still make it possible to be sovereign, I think that's pretty much good enough. You can't really be sovereign with cash today. Like if we take away Lightning and everything, you can't. It's very difficult to protect a hoard of cash in your house right now. So I guess you could be sovereign and have gold and cash. It's really hard to defend, and it's really hard to transport around and everything. So I think Bitcoin provides a lot of utility. Like it still makes it possible for you to be sovereign. I don't think you necessarily have to be sovereign to make good use of Bitcoin, but I think it is one of the great features of Bitcoin is that you can be, and it leads me to believe that the future will be a hybrid approach, and you'll see people who are like institutional investors. They don't need to be their own. Maybe they don't need to be their own custodians. Like that's maybe too much of a headache for them. They don't care. It's kind of good that the technology allows for them to not have to care about it and someone else can do it. But I think it's really important that people who are maybe otherwise excluded from a traditional financial system have the ability to get around them by being self-sovereign. And I think so long as we keep that in mind as we're developing things, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I agree. I mean, you use it how you want to use it, but as long as you have the avenue to use it, and the way you choose to, that's going to be the best case scenario. Hopefully, I get from 75% of my transactions up to 100% of my no transactions. But I also understand the liquidity problem. It might be me. It might not be, the network.
Yeah, I don't know who you have channels open to, but that it usually helps to have channels open to hubs in the network. That we don't really want this design in the network, but it is kind of a hub and spoke network where a lot of people end up connecting to kind of these like mega nodes who have like a lot of Bitcoin on them and a lot of liquidity, and that's okay. And then of course you can deplete your own channel, the balance of your channel such that you can't send Bitcoin from your channel, and that's always there's no getting around that other than looping back into your channel or opening a new one with Bitcoin. So it's like it's a bit of a pain, but I think it'll get better.
Yeah, I'm with the pain. I mean, just one of those guys. So like I had my node set up since 2020, but it was specifically for just podcasting, value for value, streaming sats in. Cool. So I didn't really need major channels, right? I didn't need any of that stuff. And then as of lately, I wanted to take the sovereign approach as for a few plans that I have for the website, which is, maybe offering some merchandise and stuff like that. So then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be lazy and I'm just going to do open node. It is what it is. Invoice system, whatever. Shout out to John, by the way, Zapright. I should be using Zapright, but I tried open node, and then I really got disgruntled with the whole KYC process, right? Like I have to take a picture of my face, all this stuff. And on top of all that, they still want 1% out of every transaction.
Yeah.
So with things like BTC Pay Server out there, I'm thinking, well, why the hell am I doing that? I have a node here. Let's rock and roll. It hasn't been smooth. It's been quite the journey to try to get it all set up and to get it to run properly. I finally got it set up properly to where it's masking my IP address from home and all that good stuff and all this. And then I don't have liquidity. So I forgot about the liquidity aspect. I tell a buddy of mine's real cocky, hey, donate, check out, on the website, you can donate now, BTC Pay Server, and they couldn't donate anything because I didn't have any inbound liquidity for that node. So long story short, that's basically what I'm working on now is, getting deeper into the stuff of Lightning that I thought I already knew, but obviously I don't know shit about shit. And it's starting to play full circle here. So I like the pain though. I like the learning experience. I think everybody should go through it. A completely different example, but same thing with seed signer, right? I'm waiting for a seed signer to show up. And the reason being is because I think hardware wallets in general have kind of made the majority of the people fall asleep at the wheel, is what I like to say. So you set up your private keys, you start dumping into cold storage, but you don't really interact with this private key, right? You don't really interact with your devices. Every now and then you sign. But now with the seed signer, it's like I could just literally just have a whole education 101 on, multi-sig and XPubs and that's really what I want to do is like absorb the pain of learning to be able to fully understand these things.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right approach. I think learning is pain. I think that's what it requires to learn is, and the pain is really just you having expectations that something is going to turn out a certain way and it doesn't. And that's really not that bad. And if at the end of that you learn something, you get better at something, you gain a skill. That's a really fair cost to pay, as your expectations aren't met about what you can do, and you just continually go through that, and eventually your expectations will be met about what you can do, and it'll all pay off. But yeah, it is like a very low time preference thing, learning, but well worth it, I think.
Yeah, you got to want it enough.
Yeah.
All right, Keyan, we're almost close to wrapping up here. I can't go a whole conversation without talk about Pleb Labs. So I know you've been, since the very beginning in Pleb Labs. What's your relationship with Pleb Labs officially? Because I know you've been around, but I don't know if it's like actually doing some leadership there or if you just.
Yeah. I'm a co-founder of Pleb Lab. I was there when it first started. We all signed the incorporation documents. I'm full-time on Stacker News, so I'm not full-time on Pleb Lab, obviously, but I try to spend as much time in working on Pleb Lab with Kyle and Carr as I can. It's mostly, I would say it's a lot of like, here's what I know about startups, and that's probably not going to work, and that's probably not going to work, or a lot of the guys are in the same position me, so I don't really have much. I'm not an expert, so I don't have expert advice to give to anyone, but I can give advice to be like, this is how because I've been watching the startup space for a long time. I've seen a startup that looks like that, and this is maybe how you maybe approach that problem. Or this is a person I've talked to already in this space, and this is how they say you approach that problem. So I mostly serve the role as like speaking for the founders that Pleb Lab has in it. That's I like represent them as best I can to Carr and Kyle, so that we make decisions that founders will like. And I guess it was kind of the idea for us all to work together was my idea, but creating an accelerator was not my idea. That was Kyle's idea, I think. I wanted to get book winners to work together. I just thought it was so cool. I had watched *Halt and Catch Fire* on AMC, which is like this show about the early internet and computers, and they had a group of hackers together living in a house, and they were changing the world with internet technology and early computer technology. And I knew how valuable like being in close proximity to people who are working on similar problems to you is. And that's kind of what I wanted. And then in an attempt to make it, more sustainable, we called it Pleb Lab, and it's an accelerator.
Yeah, and it's doing magical things. I love everything that Pleb Labs is doing. And kudos to you, Kyle and Car. You guys have been great to me in the little bit of time that I've known you guys. Always been open to, helping me out and coming on the show, right? And supporting.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you guys in that. And now this is more of a hypothetical question, but it kind of, goes into the next question. What's the magic in Austin? Would Pleb Labs work anywhere else? Or is it just an Austin thing, if in your opinion?
I mean, I personally don't think it would. I know people who are maybe thinking about creating them in San Francisco and other places. I don't think it would be nearly as fruitful as it is here, and I think it's just because there's such a concentration of Bitcoiners, like such a high concentration relative to some of these other places. Like, I think if you took all the Bitcoiners in the Bay Area and you'd maybe get a similar number, if not more, Bitcoiners in the Bay Area than there are in Austin. But the number of Bitcoiners that are in Austin for its size are quite large. So like on an individual basis, the likelihood that someone you encounter in Austin is a Bitcoiner is like much higher than anywhere else, I believe, in the world. So that's why I think it works. And I think that's why, Austin gained that status. It was maybe only had a slight edge at some point, but there was like enough noise created from Austin Bitcoiners on Bitcoin Twitter, etc., that it attracted even more Bitcoiners. And now it's like a bit of a snowball thing. And so I hope that people create hacker houses and things for other Bitcoiners in other places. I just don't think it'll be as successful because it just doesn't have enough Bitcoiners in the same area as Austin does. So, and that's really the magic, is like being in person with people who share your mission. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've gotten that vibe. Hopefully be, in the next few months here, be down there with y'all because, you're not
here?
I'm not here. No, every time you see me, I fly in. I'm there often.
No, really?
Yeah, I fly often because, Unchained Capital and the job and stuff. But
I thought you moved. Oh, no.
It's been in the works for like a year. That's probably why you thought so.
I see. Okay. I always see you. All right.
It feels like it. But so today, a few hours from now, literally, I'm going to go and sign the purchase and sales agreement for the house.
Cool.
Maybe divulging a little too much here for the listeners, but
congrats.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So hopefully, like I said, it'll be more of a permanent thing, and I get to soak all everything you guys got going on and full time and not just part time.
Oh yeah.
Last question for you, Keyan. What has you excited in the Bitcoin space? Is there anything in specific, or are you just kind of just chugging along and waiting to see what's next?
Wow, that's a big one. I'm really curious. I'm really interested in what's going on with like decentralized social media stuff. So this is kind of Bitcoin tangential, but I think I've been watching the Nostr community a lot, and that's kind of interesting. This protocol that Fiat Joff created, that a lot of that's really, it's beautiful in its simplicity, and it's gained quite a bit of momentum in terms of like people wanting to toy around with it. I think that's really cool. And then so I tend to take this perspective on decentralized social media, and that I think we'll get a decentralized social media system that really works when it has incentives built into it that are similar to Bitcoin's. So I pay a lot of attention to technology there. One thing I'm kind of really looking forward to are these things called PTLCs that Taproot enables us to have in Lightning channels. It's a bit complicated technically, but that's kind of interesting. And I think it'll allow us maybe to provide some more types of things to basically layer threes. What else is going on? I mean, there's so much stuff getting built. I'm really just interested in like what do people want? What do users want? It seems like we're getting some more and more adoption of Lightning. I'm really looking forward to like more of that collision between like real world use cases and Bitcoin, and just I know there's going to be really cool stuff that comes out of that.
Yeah, Yeah. I'm looking. I don't know about a few of those things, but Lightning has me rewrapped because I thought I had it figured out, and now just like the ability, like value for value podcasting and what that can open up for content creators, has me kind of blown away, and the doors that come from that.
Yeah.
So as I told you before you got on the show, 5% of all the streams that come in value for value here to the podcast are going to open sets. I like to offer my guests a 5% just for their time and just for their their good words and time pretty much. So I want to leave it open for you, good sir. Where would you want to send your 5% of these sets?
Yeah, let's send them to open sets too. You said you give another 5. You already give 5% to open sets.
Oh yeah, you can match it. We can make that 10%.
Yeah, let's do 10%. I love what they're doing, and yeah, I think that sounds good. Sounds good to me.
All right, well, appreciate you. I'll make sure that the episode gets 10% going over to open sets. Keyan, this has been fantastic. I want to give you an opportunity to just let the listeners know where they can follow you, where they can find Stacker News, how they can get on board, and anything you want here. A section for you to plug your work.
Yeah. It's stacker.news is the website. In the footer, you can link to my Twitter's there. I don't really tweet a whole bunch, but it's there. Stacker_news on Twitter. Just come check out Stacker News. Sign up for an account. It's pretty simple. And if you have any questions, ask them. My DMs are open. Holler at me. Whatever.
Appreciate your time, good sir.
Yeah.
And folks, if you haven't been listening to the show and you don't have a Lightning wallet already, get yourself one, whether it's custodial or non-custodial, just to get a little bit of taste. You could go on Stacker News. You could provide some feedback. You can earn some sats there with the airdrop. We didn't talk about the airdrop, but that's fantastic. And conversely, you can support open source developers through open sats by streaming value for value here on Fountain app or on Breeze. So check us out and please show them some love. Keeps the lights on, supports good developers that keep this privacy technology alive and well, and we need to be able to support those things. As for viewing this video, check us out on Bitcoin TV. That's probably the best place you can check us out, and that's another platform that I hope can one day take over the YouTubes of the world. But if you're not Bitcoin ready and you're not Lightning ready, we're also available on all the other legacy platforms. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and all those other good places. As always, we appreciate y'all. Keyan, I appreciate you. And that's going to wrap up another episode. Later, y'all.
Bye.